This video is going to remind you how to simplify algebraic expressions, and one of the things that we use to simplify expressions is the concept of collecting like terms. So before we collect them, let's remind ourselves what are like terms. So like terms have the same variable and the same coefficient and the same exponent. So now what are those words? Here's a term. So for example, 5x squared. The x is the variable. The 5 is called the coefficient. So let's write the word coefficient. X is the variable. And the 2 is called the exponent. And in order for terms to be like terms, and that they can be added and subtracted, they must have the same variable and the same exponent. And they'll have different coefficients, and that's fine. So examples of like terms would be x, 4x, 1/2 x, negative 3x, 1000x. Okay, all of these terms have the same variable and the same exponent. There's no exponent here, so that's a little invisible 1. Notice that x and x squared are not like terms. And if you forget that, think of it this way. Pretend that the x is centimeters. So, for example, I can have a line that is 8 centimeters long, okay? But x squared, that would be square centimeters. We use square centimeters for area. So, square centimeters looks like this. So, for example, this would be 8 square centimeters. I can get it by going, I don't know, 2 centimeters by 4 centimeters, something like that. So you can see that this line and the rectangle, not square, the rectangle are not the same thing. Centimeters and centimeters squared are not the same thing. If I think about cubed, so here's a rectangular prism where I'll make it a cube, 2 by 2 by 2. The volume of this is in cubic centimeters, so the volume would be 8 cubic centimeters, length times width times height. So even though they're all 8, they're not like terms because a line and a rectangle and a three-dimensional figure are not the same thing. So therefore x and x squared and x cubed are different. We cannot add them together. You cannot add a line and a rectangle. Okay, they've got to be the same items. So if you have items that are the same, so for example 5x plus 2x minus 8x, we can add these up. So this is just going to be adding up the coefficients. So you have to know your integers. You have to know how to work with integers. I do have a video that reviews integers, so if you need that, please do it. If you're allowed to use a calculator in your class, then go ahead and put the coefficients in the calculator if your integers are not strong. But I really recommend that you watch the video on integers and practice doing these things without a calculator, because you'll just save yourself a lot of time. So 5x and 2x, so these are all the same objects. We're adding them up as if they're apples. 5 apples plus another 2 apples, and subtract 8 apples. So 5x plus 2x is 7x. So 7x, and then we're going to subtract 8x. If I have 7 x's and I take away 8 of them, I'm left with negative x. Just with the coefficients, it's 7 minus 8. 7 minus 8 is negative 1. So that's collecting like terms. And sometimes you'll have an expression that has different variables. So 5x plus 10a minus x minus 6a plus 4x. Okay, and let's add these up. Well, to add these up, you can see you got a bunch of x's and a bunch of a's. So what I like to do is I like to underline the like terms in the same manner. So this is a straight line to put the x's together, and then I'm going to use a squiggly line to show that the a's go together. Now what you can do is, if you like, this is an optional step, but if you like, you can rewrite this so that the like terms are beside each other. So there's my 5x. Make sure you take the sign with it, because that shows a subtraction. So minus x, and I'll take this one, plus 4x. Then I'll do the a's. 10a minus 6a. Okay, and now my a's are together, my x's are together. 5x minus x is 4x, plus another 4x is 8x. Positive 10a minus 6a is positive 4a. And now I've simplified it. Now, actually, we should write these in alphabetical order. If you learned this in grade 9, then you'll know this. If you didn't learn it in grade 9, it's okay. Usually we write them in alphabetical order. Okay? And that's collecting like terms. The last thing to show you about simplifying is called the distributive property. So I'm going to write it over here. Distributive property says that if I have a quantity, so let's say x plus 5, and I want to multiply this entire quantity by a number, by 2, that's the same as multiplying each of these individual things by 2. So that is going to equal to 2 times x, and then also 2 times 5. Okay, so look what I've done. I've distributed this 2 with multiplication into both of the items in the brackets. If this is not so clear, think of it with just numbers. Let's say I have a 3 and a 4, and I multiply this by some other number. Let's say, I don't know, 10. Okay, this becomes 10 times. So order of operations says you got to add these up first, do the bracket first. So 10 times 7, which is 70. That's the same as doing 10 times 3 plus 10 times 4. So I can multiply the 3 by 10 and then also multiply the 4 by 10 and then add them together. So this is 30 plus 40 and that is 70. So you can see these two are equal. So this is called distributing. Okay, and you'll need to practice with that. Sometimes you have negatives. So let's say, for example, negative 5, and I'll use a different variable. Let's go c. 2c minus 1. Okay. Notice there's no equal sign here, which means we're not going to figure out a value of c. We're just going to work with the c's. You're not going to end up with c equals something because it's not an equation. So negative 5 times 2c minus 1, you distribute this negative 5 with multiplication to both terms in the bracket. So negative 5 times 2c is negative 10c. The coefficients are multiplied and your variable is just c. Now negative 5 times negative 1 is a positive number because it's negative times negative, and with multiplication, when you have two negatives, becomes a positive and you get a 5. So that is distributed. And the last thing we'll do is I'll give you one sort of more complicated question. So let's go 3 times w plus 4y minus y minus 2 plus 6w. Okay, and let's simplify this. So what you're going to do is you're first going to do the multiplications and distribute, and then we'll collect the like terms. So 3 times w is 3w. 3 times 4y, you just multiply the coefficients, so that's 12y. This is here negative 1. When you don't see a number, that's a fake 1. So negative 1 times y is negative 1y. And notice I'm not writing it because you can leave out 1s when they're the coefficient. And then negative 1 times negative 2 becomes positive 2. And then we have our 6w. Okay, so let's figure out what our like terms are. I got w and w. I'm including the sign. I have y's. And this 2 doesn't have a buddy because numbers without variables have to go only with other numbers. So it does not have another like term. So I'm going to mark it differently so that it stands out different. If you like, you can do the step of rewriting this so that the like terms are together, but you don't have to. And now we can just add them. So 3w plus 6w is 9w. Positive 12y minus y is 11y. And then plus 2. And now we're simplifying. Okay, please practice and ask any questions in class. Thank you.